you for allowing me to wave on. Mr. McCurry, thank you again for being here. As I said in my opening statement, Georgia's ports have seen tremendous growth over the past few years and few decades, to be quite honest with you, and they've seen significant investments into the infrastructure required for our ports. And I didn't say, but I want to say, the Georgia ports are the economic engine of the Southeast. And when I say Southeast, I don't mean Southeast Georgia. I mean the Southeast. The impact of the Georgia ports are felt all the way up to the Ohio Valley, as you know, and as I hope everybody knows. Mr. McCurry, could you expand on the potential impacts this rule could have on port operations?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I think that first and foremost, none of us, I believe I speak for everybody here, want to see any right whales injured, much less killed, one reason or another. But when you look at the practical impacts that the proposed rule would have on operations at the Port of Savannah, the Port of Brunswick, any port along the East Coast, or at least most of the ports on the East Coast are in the zone affected, you run into two things. With the size of the pilot vessels having to be restricted, or the speed restricted in lieu of a size change, then the lives and the safety of the pilots are perversely at danger. And wind considerations offshore, which is obviously prevalent all the time, particularly during the winter season and into the early spring, what would happen if the pilots cannot go out and access the vessels for transit on schedule, then they'll just have to wait. Particularly with the element of criminalization of the decision to adjust the speeds of the vessels that are necessary for safely transiting the channels, you're looking at, in all likelihood, supply chain delays that probably exceed those that we saw during the pandemic because of the delay of vessels being able to safely transit channels. In terms of the ships themselves, the speed of the vessel must constantly be adjusted to maintain safe transit. I think that we have seen an unfortunate accident that, now granted it was because of the loss of power and therefore steerage of a vessel very near here in Baltimore, but if you can't constantly adjust the speed of the vessel in and out of a port, then you obviously are at risk of a grounding or a collision, vessels colliding with one another, or potentially even vessel colliding with buildings along a channel, such as what you see in Savannah and other places. So it's not about a preference of rule or no rule. It's about smart rulemaking and providing for the safety above all else of maritime traffic.
So if you had a backlog like could potentially happen because the ships couldn't get into port in a timely fashion, how would that impact the competitiveness of the ports on the East Coast?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that practically speaking, those delays become such that the ships have to find other ports to go to. So there is an economic impact to the ports along the East Coast by virtue of vessels departing to go to other places. There's also, as I stated earlier in my testimony, that the environmental impacts of vessels having to steam longer or simply sit at anchor with their engines running, that creates additional greenhouse gas emissions that we don't want to see either. So there are economic consequences to not just selfishly the ports that want the business, but to the cost of moving goods on the East Coast and the businesses that are in place along the East Coast that will be affected by that. And then there's environmental impact by the longer transit and longer steaming times at anchor.
Right. Well, as you know, we've got the largest single economic development project ever in the state of Georgia, close to the Savannah Port, and in the first district that I have the honor and privilege of representing, $5.5 billion investment by Hyundai that's going to create 8,100 jobs. We are having enormous growth in our area. How's this, if this rule were to go into effect, what kind of impact would it have on the future of the Savannah Port as well as the Brunswick Port?
I think at a minimum, you're talking about a significant increase in the cost of moving goods. And so the good movement often finds the path of least resistance, both financially and in terms of the time to get to and from markets. So it could have a significant economic impact on the ports in your district. But honestly, the same applies up and down the East Coast, the ports that are also going to be impacted by this.
Great. Again, thank you for being here today. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for allowing me to wave on.